as you grow older, you become more aware of the passing of time. You don't think like this in your 20s or your 30s, and you shouldn't do so. But when you enter the 40s, it begins to click with you that life's going by more quickly than you were thinking. When you enter the 50s, it's a relevant query to be asked, are both your parents alive? One tradition which certainly brings your feet right down to the ground is Graveyard Sunday. And I'm acutely aware today that this is a spiritual moment for me, because this is my first visit to County Monaghan as a visitor. I don't live in the county anymore. I live in Sligo. And one day a year, I always visit Carrick Macross, my hometown, for Graveyard Sunday. In fact, if I ever met anyone from Carrick in Sligo, the odd time that happens, they might say to me something like, I'll see you at the graves. I'll see you at the graves in July, Shane. And it's a remarkable tradition, because it's a very humbling experience when we all gather around the graves, the whole parish in that big field, us all looking deeply into the clay and being nipped and slapped in our face by our own mortality. And I want you to imagine for a moment, because I'm going to try to bring you to the grave, because a lot of things happen on Graveyard Sunday that are not fully religious. In that I think between the prayers there's an awful lot of gossip, there's an awful lot of self-analysis, there's an awful lot of predictions made. And I want you to imagine that you're beside me at the Martin grave. There's other graves all around. And I'm speaking to Peter Boots Daly at the Daly grave behind me. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, man, hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord's with thee. Patsy's not at his grave. I says, Patsy's not at his grave. No, sure, he's fucking in the grave. I says, what? He's in the grave. When did he die? He's dead since last November. God, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. What happened to him? Well, Shane, he was a big age, He was 79, like he had a fresh face, but he was an old man when you think about it. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women. And he was he had a kind of a chesty cough. He had always coughing and spluttering, Shane. I think the diesel did it to him. He was I think the diesel's bad for you. In fact, when he'd be filling up the car, he'd be spitting. Do you remember that? I said, I do remember that when you think about it. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women. I said, and who's that woman across from us? Is that Elizabeth Higgins? Yes, that's Elizabeth. God, I didn't know her in the glasses. I didn't know her in the glasses at all. He says, she's changed a lot, Shane, hasn't she? She got very wide. I said, oh, she did get very wide. They say it's tablets. Tablets that done that to her. I says, God, I suppose there's all kinds of theories and the likes of that. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Who's the woman, who's the man beside her there with the long hair and the beard? That's her son. It's not. She doesn't have anyone that age, Peter. Definitely not. No, I'm telling you, I was talking to him at the gate there. He was doing the collection box. With the long hair and the beard. I says, yeah, sure, they all have beards nowadays, Shane. And is he in a rock band or something? No, Jesus, he's not in a rock band. I don't think he does much, to be honest with you, but he's not playing music. I says, God, I didn't know. What age is he? 23, Shane. 23. God, it's unbelievable. I can't believe that they get old so quick. I remember him knee-height. Do you remember him? I remember him as an altar boy. I do as well. And Michael Farrell, you see him, he lost the hair. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art. He used to have a big lump of hair like Michael Jackson. Remember young Michael Jackson? Yeah, but I don't know if he did, Shane. Sure, we're all losing our hair. I said, God, speak for yourself. I said, I'm holding on to whatever I have, to be honest with you. But we're all going to lose it in the end, Shane, I said, I can't get over how baldy he's gone at the same time. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women. Is that Linda Brady? That is. God, we all fancied her when she was in the convent. She was a beauty, wasn't she, Peter? She was a beauty. I said, she's 2 kids now. That's right, one to Michael and another to a foreign man. Oh, God, I says, lovely, lovely girl. She was a lovely, lovely girl. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women, and blessed. I says, Shane, I wonder, will we ever get out of this COVID? I do often wonder, will we ever get life back the way it was? I said, God, you don't know about those things. There's nothing definite. Nothing definite about the future. He says, look, he says, we lost people to COVID, Shane. We lost people to COVID. We nearly lost Daisy O'Neill. Do you see Daisy O'Neill there with the stick? Jesus, she doesn't look great. Sure, she was in the matter for 4 months, Shane, with the COVID. I don't believe you. She was, yeah. I wonder, will she be a graveyard Sunday next year? Jesus, I don't know about that one. That's a big question, Shane. I don't know if you saw the family grave. It sunk a bit. Huh? It's gone down at least 3 inches, the cement and all. You know what to say about that? You know what to say about that. Jesus, Peter, you'd cheer anyone up. So I want to read a poem from my new collection of poems called See You at the Graves. And some of us might remember it. Remember that moment, because you'd be walking through graves and on graves that were not being kept anymore because there was no one to look into them or pray over them anymore. As a young boy, I'd often be reading the stories. I'd see maybe children who died very young, loads of them in the one family. And people said it was fever at the time. See you at the graves. I'll see you at the graves where the dreamers gather, where lips lilt token prayers to the Father, and children follow tales on christened stone as whispers go unheeded from those unknown. I'll see you at the graves and hope the clouds hold or splatter as hymns and psalms focus on all that matters. Some eyes glisten, some hearts feel pain, mulling untouched theories as regrets remain. I'll see you at the graves in awe at how much time passes. Decades have folded since soil was opened, children grown since last rites spoken, family members absent, new babies awoken. I'll see you at the graves where health is hallowed and more sacred. Our mortality strips itself bold and naked as we wonder, will the sick ever make it? All is counted with the spade, the digger rakes it. I'll see you at the graves as the preacher blesses. For forgotten families he beseeches, confesses. Brazen grasses the wind caresses, short sleeved shirts and summer dresses. I'll see you at the graves where bouquets join hardened clay, where those who congregate never stay. The grounds fall silent, weeds win their way, lonely ghosts linger after the forgotten day. And, when I look back, I was blessed with a happy childhood. Not everybody can say that, but I think it's important to count your blessings. We can all remember the bad things better, I think. And sometimes we forget the good things that happen. And if you could remember the good things more often, you'd be in better form more often. But I'm a Carrickmacross man. I always will be, even though I lived in Monaghan for nearly 30 years. I was sent away to boarding school after bombing in the high school. I was described as absent-minded in the tutor report. I failed everything. And I often felt I lost my hometown. It was the right decision because I was so lazy. I think I was going to bomb anyway. But I want to read a selection of poems from my days in Carrickmacross, which I have great fondness for still. For the first 6 years of my life, we lived in a terraced house on Farney Street in Carrick. And when I'd come out the front door, I could see St. Joseph's Church. It's right beside me. It used to play melodies and hymns on the hour. The bells of the Angelus used to go on for ages at 6 o'clock. But it intrigued me. And then I'd go up the back garden. It was slightly like a hilly back garden. And there was a little gate. And I'd go across a pathway. And there was a dip in the wall. And I went in there and I was in St. Joseph's primary school grounds. So I was walking distance to the church, and we went to a lot of masses. And I was also walking distance up the back through that little dip in the wall into St. Joseph's school. And so I'm going to read a poem about that. I'm also going to read a poem about sounds and that I remember when I used to sleep or try to sleep in my bed from that terraced house. I'm also going to talk about Paddy Ross's shop, which is long gone from O'Neill Street, but it was a shop, and every rural town had one of these. It was a shop that sold everything, from a mouth organ to a compass. Like you could always go down to Paddy Ross's shop. You know, you might even have a disposable camera or something there as well if you were stuck for a photograph. And so I'm going to read a few poems from Carrick MacCross, starting with St. Joseph's School, because about 3 years ago, I decided to go up to St. Joseph's Primary School. And it was many decades since I was there. And God, I remembered it very clearly as a child. I will start with that one, St. Joseph's. St. Joseph's. If I was to play a melody of childhood songs, it would not place me in the benches. The school bells sound, but other children follow. No chalk dust in the air, no rhyming of prayer. A little boy sits on the wall where the daffodils gather, but my mother is not slipping him buttered Mariettas through the gap. There are no short pants or fumbling of marbles on hard clay. As days draw their curtains down, the ball bounces wide in the winds. I cannot smell the polish like when in hurried pace I sprinted to the organ, pressing keys as my heart raced. Master McCall's tunes spent like yesterday's breaths. If I was to play a melody, it would reach out to the ghosts and plead for another day to tease, scream, sing, and cry. And when the spell would die, I would hold tighter, like the daisy clasped in my hand. So that's St. Joseph's School. Then one about Farney Street here, called Whispers and Footsteps. And the great poet, who I often saw, and we lost him a few years ago, Dermot Healy, he used to be around Sligo an awful lot. Sometimes when you write poems, you realize that poems like the one you're about to write have been written before, because the same things trouble poets. Like, for instance, every poet is always talking about the passing of time. And Dermot Healy also was remembering sounds from his childhood, and I was influenced by him in this poem, and I dedicated it to him as well, although he never knew, because he's no longer with us. But Whispers and Footsteps. I heard a voice of someone talking to his dog or comforting himself. Of course, this cannot be. Farney Street has left my cell. But those sounds of footsteps and whispers from Rooney's pub brought back the child that once was, peeping through the curtain gap, body stretched from the warmth of woolen blankets, to watch flash lamps skip and car lights dip at Gartland's grocery shop. That child eavesdropped on nightly whispers, spied on moonlit shoes, until eyelids became heavier and he had more to choose. And Carrick has changed an awful lot, and I nearly sound ancient, but when I was growing up, it was a big day out for the family when you were getting a pair of shoes. Now you buy them and you can fire them in the bin and buy another pair a few weeks later if you don't like them. But I think either they were more expensive, or maybe culturally they were seen as something that you only purchased and maybe got soles put on. But there was a shop on Main Street called Connolly's Shop. It's long gone now. They were in Dundalk as well. And I wrote this poem, and there's so many people who remember this shop. And they say that I got it right in terms of how I describe it. Connolly's Shoe Shop. Shoes for the boys, leather soles and uppers. Tipped heel. Winstanley or Clark's in Connolly's Shoe Shop. We took turns on the leather flat seat and pushed our woolen sole tight to the steel meter in Connolly's Shoe Shop. 2 types in that size, black and brown. And he dragged the ladder to the skyscrapers of shoes in Connolly's shoe shop. The boxes were corded as the smell of the ox was buried in brown paper. And it was a big day out in Connolly's shoe shop. So my kids say I sound like someone from the 1800s when I read that poem to them. Another one from Carrick is Paddy Ross's. And, you know, that's the shop that had everything in it. He probably sold more bicycles than anything. And there was someone from Carrick that said to me, Shane, it's funny, you wrote a poem about Paddy Ross's shop, but you didn't mention the bicycles. And I says, of course I didn't, because I wasn't interested in them. I had no interest. I mentioned the things that I remember. And this is I remember Christmas time, there was a Santa Claus figurine in the window with a nodding head. It used to be plugged in. And that used to signal. He was one of the first to put the Christmas decorations in the window, Paddy, long gone. In Paddy Ross's shop. Walking up the wooden plank floor, tips of my heels adding ticks to the litany of tocks and chimes, of dust-combed wall monuments. I lean on glass presses, my fingers smudging their mark between watches, brooches, mantle ornaments, as twin motionless dogs in ginger shades guard the beaded necklaces, silver pens, pipes, lighters, and hearing aids. I seek a mouth organ, and I stoop lowly, breathing clouds on the panes, as close as my nose will go. There are 2 of them there. In the back room, I hear a radio tell the news and watch pipe smoke rise, reaching for the ceiling high. And then Paddy's steps signal my final seconds before I sprint into New Street and a race against time. I was blessed with 2 wonderful parents. They were taken far too early. My father, 20 years ago, my mother, 10 years ago. My father, I miss him for so many things. I miss him for his wisdom, and you don't get that at school. He only had primary education, but it's his wisdom I miss. He was also an optimist, and I didn't appreciate that when he was alive. I used to find it very annoying. But during this pandemic, you'd need an optimist on every committee, I think. I think the optimistic people were predicting vaccines over a year ago, and we thought they were nuts. Oh, there'll be no vaccines, the pessimistic people were saying. But thank God we're getting our way out of this COVID. And I miss him for that wisdom and his humour. I miss my mother for her kindness. She was a nurse. She mothered me into my 40s. Whenever I would visit her, if I had a runny nose, she'd be ringing me the next day to see if I had a chest infection. And not all of us have good memories of childhood and or good memories of family, but I meet a lot of very unhappy people as a psychologist. And you'll never be happy all the time. In fact, the one thing that's guaranteed during this life which we live once is unhappiness. All of us have experienced it already. But it would be a wonderful thing if we could achieve as much happiness as is humanly possible while we live. To be above our set point of happiness more often than below it. To have a high average score for happiness would be a wonderful thing. And sometimes I meet people and they can't rise to it for very good reasons. Maybe due to the circumstances that they find themselves in. But psychology tells us that, if we look back on the golden moments that we have experienced, because everybody has been blessed, wonderful things have happened all of us. And if you could remember those good things more often, you'd be in better form more often. So I talk a lot about my parents, and bereavement is something that's very, very individual. It's very personal. Like the father I miss, I'm missing different things than the father that my brother and sisters is missing. The mother that I long for. There's things I want back that maybe weren't valued as much by my brother and sisters. It's a very, very personal experience, bereavement. But I don't want to forget them. You know, I want to keep them alive in my head. So they stay with me. They stay with me in everything I do. And I remember my father when he died, and he was the seventh generation of painters in Carrickmacross. There was a time when himself and Larry, there was about 22 shop fronts on the main street that were painted by one or both of them. You know, the gold leaf script. It used to take maybe 2 weeks to do a sign. There was no stickers in those days or PVC. It was a craft. And I'd go up one ladder, and my father would go up the other ladder, and we'd chalk a cord and pull it tight against the sign, and he'd snap it. That was the line for the letters. I remember it so well. But after he died, I remember visiting my mother, and I ended up in the home house for the first time. And she wasn't there. She was down, as I say in Carrickmacross, she was down doing the messages. And I let myself in, and it was a spiritual moment. I knew this was the first time I was in the house without my father, and he'd never be here again. And I took a pen out, and I wrote this poem in about 7 minutes. And that can happen. You can hit the jackpot. It just oozes out of you. And it's called I Thought I Heard Him. The next poem is also about my father. It's called The Boots, because I ended up with his boots, and I could remember so much about those boots. So we'll start with the I Thought I Heard Him. And because I was longing for certain sounds in the silent house. I thought I heard him. I thought I heard him in the yard as the steel coal buckets kissed, his boots munching on the gravel, as the coal lumps were scooped and slid into rows along the wall. I thought I heard him, scattering hen meal, eyeing birds, him overlooking the roof tiles towards the swans on Lissinisk, as his thoughts dashed and dived. I thought I heard him with the paint tins, stirring new colours out of the old, striking lines with chalk and cord on the white plywood boards, him muttering with the transistor. I thought I heard him at the gable wall, letting potato bags slump in line, dragging sacks of blocks for the fires that would burn until the nights died, like memories smouldering in my dreams. The boots. His boots are coated in the earthly oils of Drumlin Hills, dropping crumbs of fields, stones, dung, and grass stumps, like Lenten ashes, smudging the kitchen lino with reverence. Pulled from worn feet, placed toe first towards the range. They sleep in the shadow of indifference, and while there, their clay hardens into powdered dust, wrinkled leather, exposing hidden lines, bruises, tears. Tongues spilling over in a deathly plea that stutters on deaf ears. They served their master's journey well. Today, they are a relic, a funnel for tears. I don't have comprehensive poems about my mother because I think it'd be correct to say that I'm not fully at ease about that just yet to write in detail about her. I think that largely that was due to the fact that I was just after getting over the death of my father, and I think she was beginning to turn a corner, and terminal illness took both of them. But in the next collection of poems, there will be I've worked on a few poems that are not finished about my mother. But there's one which I do want to include in this little reading, because I think sometimes, I discovered this as a psychologist, sometimes you don't know what people are really going through. Um, like my first post as a psychologist was in Monaghan town where I was living. And there were people in the queue coming in to meet me, and I thought I had everything. But as my father used to say, what have you got if you haven't got your health, son? And I'm always aware of that sometimes you don't know what people are going through. People can be very private. They can keep the sunny side out. And that's why it's so important to look out for each other. And I used to look out for my mother. I used to visit her nearly every day. I was living in the county in Monaghan, and you could take a spin down. It didn't always suit, but I got to her as often as I could, so I've no regrets in that way, because I knew that she was sitting in her own company for a lot of the time. That had to be very hard. And I'm just going to read a poem now that I wrote, and it's called At the Door. And I used to hate leaving her because she'd say something like, you know, thanks for the visit, Shane, but sure, I'm in here on my own now. I'm on my own now, just with the telly. And it's called At the Door. If I could find it now, it'd be fantastic. At the door, you stand waving, your eyes following me like a lover, watching the ship pull away. I see your face fall into the bay. At the door, you stare, listless, your thoughts twinkling like the night bulbs in the moving mysteries of the waves. I see the sea salt in your eyes. And on the same theme, houses have never been as close to each other, and people have never been further apart. It's incredible. Even during this pandemic, there's kids on roads, and they don't know each other's names. Sometimes there's kids who only play with people who wear the same uniform as them. When I was their age, I played with everybody. 2 years younger, 2 years older. I was willing to kick ball with anybody. A lot of young people are now lying on their bellies upstairs, watching a screen, not even tasting the food that they eat. How many families even sit around the table anymore and hear each other's stories from the day? When I was a young boy, you had to come for your dinner because we had no microwave. If you didn't come, it went cold. It was put back into the main oven for an hour, and it was rock hard after an hour. You learn very quickly. Now you can call your kids for dinner. Everyone down for dinner. It's on the table. Come on down, folks. And they might shout down, no, Mommy, I'm on level 6. I'll lose all my progress. The Martins sit at a table. I put it right in one night. I was the worst culprit for years. For years, I thought you needed an iPhone or an iPad, but I've discovered in recent years you only need a knife and a fork. How was your day? How did you get on? As we grow older, our social network becomes smaller, but it's when you grow older, you need more people in your life. I don't know what happens in the 30s. I think some of us think it's illegal to make new friends. It's fully legal, I've checked it. The more friends you have, the better. This poem called The Road is me writing from the house I lived in Monaghan. And although I had great neighbours, I just knew as a psychologist that there's so much you don't know what's going on in someone's house at the same time. And it used to be called Park Road in the first collection, but I was afraid maybe that people on the road thought I was talking about them. So I changed it to The Road, and I could write this poem from Sligo, and I wouldn't change a bit of it, because it's the same no matter what town you're in. That whole, I suppose, distance, even though you're close physically, there's a distance between you and a lot of others. The road. I live on a road where no one knows me, nor me them. Yet car lights flash at each other as we raise one finger from a steering wheel grip as a qualified salute. From 7 a.m. onwards, we are munching cornflakes, still watching the clock. I live on a road where tired bodies unlock front doors in the evening fog, falling to the couch, mesmerized between the flickering charcoal and that of the electric picture house. Too tired to talk the real talk. Now munching chops and potatoes, and still clock watching, determining whether it's time to roll between the sheets of sleep and become still from it all. I live on a road where the sameness of it all has us by the neck, and our lives burn away, smouldering to the rhythm of the tick-tock. A few years ago, I was at a wedding, and I no longer tell people that I'm a psychologist. At the beginning, I nearly was proud of the qualification. I'd be saying to people, actually, I'm a psychologist myself. But I've learned not to do that because you get asked very funny questions when you're about to tuck into your turkey and ham. And I remember it was a wedding I was at in Meath, and I was about to tuck into my turkey and ham, and Sean said to me, Shane, are you a psychologist? I said, I am. I have a question for you. I hope you don't mind me asking you. I said, no, fire away, no problem. And you know what he said to me? Why does life go by so quickly? I said, God, I need a few points in me before I'd even attempt that one, Sean. That's a very deep question. I said, that's not one for psychology. It might be one for philosophy. But the question stayed with me that evening, and it hung with me the next day. Why does life go by so quickly? And I have the answer. It's an exclusive answer to you that's listening now. I figured it out. Life goes by so quickly because we're not aware we're here half the time. We're rushing to the next thing. We're wondering about the last thing, and we're missing a bit in the middle, the precious life that you live once. So many people spend most of their life doing the things they feel they're meant to be doing and sleeping. There's so much more to it than that. I've met people who regret not having got to know their kids when they were growing up. Yet everyone lived in the same house for those years. And, you know, I'm thinking of a woman from this town, and I'm quoting her for 11 years, and she doesn't know that I'm quoting her, but she said something to me that stayed with me. I was at the end of a meeting, and she said to me, Shane, I literally haven't a minute. My head is spinning like that. I'm losing time talking to you. That's how busy I am. I said, you better head, Kathleen. That's as busy as you can get. At the beginning of my career as a psychologist, I was meeting people who took a hit in life 5 days a week, people who lost the spring in their step, people who weren't sucking in the oxygen of life anymore, people who were talking to me about a job that they no longer had, that they loved. People like myself and yourself. Everybody used to be well. When I look back in it now, I realize that an awful lot of those people, they were slipping a long time before they fell down. So many people, they wait until they walk into the wall before they realize that the wall was always there. Poetry goes much deeper than psychology. I'm a poet first, I'm a psychologist definitely second. Because psychology tries to make sense of things from the outside. Poetry tries to make sense of things from the inside. You have a much better vantage point from the inside. And when we talk about mindfulness, we're talking about becoming aware of the moment, where we step away from the noise, where we become more conscious that we're here, where we get in touch with ourselves, others, and our world in a more profound way than normal. And moments can be captured in poetry. And when you capture a moment, you then have to mold it into a poem. But I want to just read a few, I suppose, moments where I saw something, where something clicked at me, where the penny dropped, where I took the helicopter view and looked down. And the first one was my daughter in Sligo. It clicked with me that she was growing up, that she had grown up a lot, actually. And it's called Letting Go. And it's the first poem in the book, Thin Lines, which came out last March. Hopefully we'll get a chance to push it when COVID lifts. And anyone who's a parent listening to me, they will identify with this moment, I think. Letting go. We are holding hands, swaying like the garden swing. Your laughter melts into mine as we speak of ice cream, cola, films, essays, sums. You pitch dilemmas, pose doubts, seek wisdom from a scribe, and then your friend appears. Like night cutting through day, our hands fall like unspent coins, like a chopped briar from the bush top, and your pace hastens like fire. Your hair is like a kite's end in light breeze as you chase stories of younger things. You glance back at me, throwing smiles like parting words at an airport. Our hands fell easily, but it is only I who sees the parting. And that's about growing up. Another one is about, I'm always fascinated by sleep. We're a very close family. The four of us don't live together anymore, but I was always aware that when we fall asleep, we're all apart from each other. And we don't know an awful lot about sleep from a psychological perspective. Like sometimes the part of your brain associated with thinking, it's at the frontier. It's more active when you're sleeping than when you're awake. You wake up from fumbled thoughts and you can't make head or tail of it. But I don't know what happens when we're asleep, really. Like we often wake up and over breakfast you realise that was only a dream I had. Jesus, I thought that was true. It nearly hangs with you, that whatever you were thinking about into reality, that fuzziness, that border that's so fuzzy. And I came home one evening from a night out with the lads, about 2 a.m, and I was letting myself in slowly and quietly into the house. And I wrote this poem called, I didn't write it on the night, but I wrote it the next day maybe, or the day after that. But I had a moment, a spiritual moment where I connected with something, where something dawned on me. And I can get it now. I have it written down here for you. You can edit all these things out maybe in it. 28. Breathing. Climbing up the staircase on the wicker floor, funneling the banister, as my shoes are heeled off on the second step. The grandfather clock catches me. Its pendulum swings as if to scold. Beer riffs its way up to a hush. And I hear breathing. I follow the breathing to life itself, my daughter spread among the half-sheets, breathing her way through a dream, faceless in a journey I cannot see. And I hear a twist. The cot mattress squeaks at me, my baby son cushioned in blankets to his chin, smiling in an adventure unknown to me, maybe recollecting his first steps without fondling walls or armchairs. Poppy eyes peep from a raised head and then plop back to the dream world. My wife will not even remember this moment. But soon family will cross the threshold to the land of faceless people and never meet each other again until the alarm clock rings. So the mystery of sleep was my mindful moment of consideration then. And another moment that struck with me, and I got it very hard to keep my tears in, was my last conversation with my father in the home house. Um, he was a collector of clocks, wag-o'-the-wall, cuckoo clocks, drop dial clocks, French mantle clocks. But his prized possession was the grandfather clock. And he brought me out to show me how to move the clock. And like he knew his days were numbered, so I think he was giving me the clock. That's what my brother and sister said anyway. But I had to write a poem about this because it was something that kind of a shiver went up my spine. I kept myself together as he told me about how to get the clock going. So this is called the grandfather clock. Now again, people often say they're very emotional poems, and would they not upset you more? It's a personal thing, bereavement, and it helps me more to remember. That's the way. Like it commemorates my parents in my head, as I already said. Like, I don't want to get over it. I don't want to get over their deaths because moments of sadness or validate the relationships I had with them. So yeah, I love writing poems and I love remembering them. The grandfather clock. We stood there as if parting. An unborn embrace hung in the cold air of the hallway as you caressed its case. Its door opened like a secret chest, and while milking the chains, you set the pendulum to a steady rhythm, chasing a preciseness and balance. Teaching me how to move its hands, each click, tick was hallowed, like unspoken prayers in an oratory, holy water welling up in the eyes. We stood there as if parting, but focused on chimes, Roman dial, knowing its frame would see us out and mock our precious moments. So this poem is called Ah, and that's the only word he had at the time. It was Ah. So it's going back. He's 21 years of age now. He's a tall, slim, athletic type. It's obviously genetic. but at this time, he was far from that. And all he could say was Ah. I found the remote control before a toilet flush. Your new shoe was in a bin with a stew mush. There were pens and paper waiting for a wash and spin. And there before me you stood with that famous grin. You hand me coins from under the chairs. You prefer matches and stones to teddy bears. Food flavored by the floor is what you like. Knives and forks, not the three-wheel bike. You only have one word in your repertoire. Screeching it loudly makes it go far. It will get you out of the cot or more to eat. The exact object you desire placed on your high seat. So we'll finish with that little innocent poem there. And thank you very much to Ìontas and to Jaki and Carl and the technicians and the sound engineers, people on lights. It's a wonderful thing to see the arts reawaken. Because it's a dangerous thing for society if they were ever to die. I don't think the arts can ever die, actually, but I think all artists we need audiences. And I have felt for the last year and a half that I've been like a musician, that I haven't spoken to a live audience in all that time. And there's a unique chemistry that feeds the performance. You can change what you're doing when you get feelings from the people looking up at you. And this is my first time in my home county as a visitor, and it's a spiritual moment for me, and I'm thrilled that it's an arts event because I'm a poet first and a psychologist second. So it's great it's not a talk on depression or anxiety that brought me to County Monaghan. So thank you very much to all of you for all of this, and I wish you well. It's great to see the lights on here on the stage again. Okay, and thank you to Jackie. Okay.